We're excited to talk with you about the GreenFaith Fellowship Program, which, as you'll learn, has been around for over a decade, and we're relaunching it this year. We're very excited about that, and we'll share with you this evening a bit of information about the new program and how to apply to it. But before we jump into the program itself, we wanted to give you a little bit of background information about GreenFaith. Many of you may know our work pretty well, but in case you don't, this is our mission statement here. We inspire, educate, and mobilize diverse religious communities globally for environmental action. And Fletcher, you can go to the next slide. I think you have slide control.
I think you have control, Stacy, so.
Sorry, folks, give me 1 second. For some reason, it's not letting me control the slides. Okay. Fletcher, did you just move that slide?
Yes.
Okay. It looks a bit big on my screen. I'm hoping folks can see the whole thing here. So just a little bit more about who we are. And Fletcher, you can just move through the content here. So as you may have seen, and as you get to know us through our emails and website, you'll see that we're interfaith. So we work with people of all faiths, all spiritualities, and across the world. We are values-based. And the reason I mention that is that we don't just deal with helping you save energy or preserve water. We really are based in spirituality and in the faith community. So everything we do is based on values, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And what we really believe most is that it's important to put your beliefs into action. So to do everything we can to help preserve the planet and to do organizing on the local level to make a very real difference in our communities. We do this in a variety of ways, and the fellowship program is one program to help you really put your beliefs into action and to become a more effective leader on the local level. Fletcher, go ahead to talk about our core values.
Yep. Briefly, there are 3 values that we orient our work around, and we talk about them in terms of spirit or spirituality, stewardship or sustainability, and justice or a combination of equity and compassion. So when we talk about spirit, we talk about the reality that I think is obvious to everybody on this call, that our traditions and all human beings see sacredness in nature, and our traditions proclaim this in their texts and rituals and teachings. And these experiences that we have form an important part of the foundation of our own spiritual identities. When we talk about stewardship, that really is talking about sustainable lifestyles and the fact that it's vital that our consumption habits heal and restore the earth rather than contributing to its degradation. And when we talk about justice, for a number of people, that's where we take action in terms of our advocacy on various policies. We, as an organization, have a commitment to viewing environmental issues through what we think of as an equity lens. So we look at what are the impacts on ecosystems, what are the impacts on the most vulnerable communities in any given area, and what are the impacts on workers. And we try always, when we're looking at these issues, to ask, how are the solutions that we're talking about going to benefit vulnerable communities, the vulnerable communities among all of our communities, workers, and fragile ecosystems. And we find that by consistently applying that kind of lens, it brings the work that we do really directly into conversation with racial and economic justice movements and groups of various kinds, increasingly with Indigenous peoples. And that's something that we are committed to as an organization. So that's a brief overview of our values. And Stacy, shall I keep on going and talking about this, or would you like to take this piece of the picture.
Sure, I can take this piece of the picture. So I wanted to just ask all of you for a moment. Many of you are here for various reasons, and so we wanted to ask, and you can chat this into us. You'll see there's a little chat window down the bottom there. To answer this question, what do you feel as you look at your own leadership in your own communities around this work? What do you really feel is needed for effective religious environmental leadership? We'd love to hear from you for just a moment here. So just send in maybe some words that come to mind or some needs in your own community around this. We see that Malcolm says awareness. Visibility is another word that's being sent in over the chat. Kelly says that it's not political. So thanks. We're getting a lot of good chat here, as you all can see, actually, it looks like. So some are saying that education and tying this to new efforts, feeling empowered, a common language for all of us to speak from, raising consciousness of environmental values. Fletcher, you can go to the next set of bullet points there. We absolutely believe everything that all of you just shared. Those are many of the reasons that we created this program over a decade ago. And what we've realized through doing this work across the decade is that there are several key pieces that are really needed to create effective religious environmental leadership. One is what we call transformational context. So really what we mean by this is bringing people together as a community to learn together and to take action together. That leads to transformation, and that really helps leaders to be much more powerful in their own communities. We've also seen that community organizing skills are critical. Many of us don't yet have those skills, even though we might know some of it intuitively. It's really important to gain the skills to know how to do community organizing and to make change happen on the local and regional level. Of course, as I mentioned, the supportive community is really key. We've seen that the fellows that we've worked with over the years still stay very tightly connected and work with each other on a lot of different initiatives. And the reason for this is that, as you probably have seen in your own work, there are not a lot of religious and faith-based people out there doing this work. It is increasing by the day. But the fact that we can come together as a community, those of us that really care deeply about this and want to enhance our leadership, we can support one another and we can be there for each other across the years as this work continues. And then, of course, the knowledge about these issues is critical. So what you'll see as we talk about the content of the program is that we bring in a lot of different experts, and we also have discussions with each other about these issues and these religious teachings and teachings around sustainability and science, so that we can learn about what this means and we can put it into action in our communities. Go ahead, Fletcher, to the next slide.
And so out of the needs that you all identified and that Stacy just spoke to, we created and now recreated the fellowship program. And I think that and I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes talking about what it is. And some of this will be very familiar to some of you, but for others, it will be new. So it is, I think, obviously a multi-faith environmental leadership training program. And I would say also leadership training community, drawing on some of what Stacy just said a couple of minutes ago. We've had classes annually since 2007. We've taken a break over the past 18 months because we wanted to take a step back, analyze what we'd learned. The religious environmental movement is very, very different now than it was back in 2007. Levels of awareness are much, much higher, which was absolutely not the case when we first got started. And so we wanted to step back and take a look and figure out how we might want to adapt the program for these new times. And we'll talk some about that. We have over 180 fellows who are in 30 different states around the United States, and also a small number of fellows in Canada and Europe and Africa. We hope now, as the program is becoming intentionally international, that we'll be able to see those international numbers climb substantially. We have about, and we've seen this is proven true over the years. We have about 40% of the participants are clergy or ordained spiritual leaders, and about 60%, so a majority, have consistently been what in some traditions are called lay leaders or non-ordained leaders. But we found that their both their participation and their impact is every bit the same and as strong as the ordained spiritual leaders. And as I've mentioned, we're now really glad to be relaunching the program, and we'll talk a little bit about some of what we've kept because we think it worked very well, and then also some new features to the program that we're adding in. So the way in which the program is structured is that it's going to be a 10-month program. It had previously been an 18-month program, and the feedback that we got fairly consistently was that was a little bit too long for people. And so the 10 months, it'll start in September, and it'll wrap up in June. So it'll overlap with, in the Global North, an academic year. And we think that that's a model that we want to work with for a while. We'll have 2 residential retreats. Retreats have just been a vitally important part of the program right from its inception. One of the retreats, the first retreat in November, will be focused on environmental racism and environmental justice and equity. And the second retreat will be focused more on relational and community organizing skills. And there'll be other themes that'll get addressed as part of each of those retreats, but those will be some of the significant themes that emerge in them both. We keep a pattern of having monthly group webinars, and what we've found is that the combination of the retreats and the webinars really enables people to get a chance to know each other pretty well and to build up an important set of skills, set of relationships, and set of a sort of body of knowledge. And in addition to the webinars, we also, as people do some writing assignments, we have everybody write a brief eco-autobiography for which we provide a template that seems to help people walk through it quite easily, but at quite a level of depth in terms of personal self-examination and then the ability to share that. We have small group discussions where fellows share those thoughts with each other, and we found that that's also a really important part of the bonding process. Back to the eco-autobiography, the purpose, one of the things that we really want out of this program for all of the participants is we want people to leave feeling that they have found a voice for themselves in relationship to this work. And we've found that it's really important to give people a chance to look at their own personal experience. Where have they encountered the sacred or the divine or God in relationship to the natural world, whether they live in a city or in a rural area or in a suburban area of some kind? What are some of the core beliefs from their own religious or spiritual tradition, from their own family or from their own culture? What are the core beliefs or the values that are most meaningful to them about this? And then we find that it's really important and meaningful for fellows to have a chance to speak publicly during the course of the program and to identify for themselves a venue to do some sort of public, whether it's public speaking or writing, so that they're not only finding their voice, but exercising it. And then the final component of the program is a leadership project. And we used to conceive of these projects as being sort of one and done, in a sense, that you would complete the project and it was finished. And that's actually something that we've changed our understanding of pretty fundamentally. We are really interested, as we relaunch this program, in developing long-term, ongoing, active working relationships with our fellows. And so what we're suggesting as the leadership project portion of the program is that fellows work on developing a local multi-faith environmental hub in their communities that we stay connected with. so that that relationship that we've invested so much in during the course of the fellowship program is something that we can continue to build over time, and so that we can learn from the work that you're doing, and we hope vice versa. Another option for the kind of leadership project that we like to think folks might be want to be involved in is GreenFaith has a host of different campaigns, and we'll speak to those in just a moment. But we think that if the local organizing angle doesn't feel right to people, that they will likely be able to identify quite strongly with one of the different kinds of campaigns that we're quite involved in, and become involved in that. And again, the goal with that is that those campaigns are ongoing. It becomes a chance to build an ongoing working relationship and really to make a difference. Now, of course, if folks have a clear sense of a project that they want to carry out in their own community or within their own working life, that's going to be fine also. But we really want to emphasize that one of the things that we're looking for in applicants for this new class is people who have a sense that this is the beginning of a long-term relationship that they'd like to have. Stacy, is there anything else you'd like to say? I mean, I sort of jumped in a bit on that, but is there anything else you'd like to say in terms of your reflections on this as we restart the program?
Sure. What I would say is that the way you see things listed here is a bit of the actual timeline of the program. So as Fletcher mentioned with the eco-autobiography, that's a lot of self-reflection and really forming your own sense of self around this work and your vision for where you want to take this. And that's where we start. So the eco-autobiography you do in the very beginning of the program, and you will share that with your peers as well. And we'll have several webinars and calls that are on that specific piece, so you can really take the time that's needed to reflect and, again, to build that vision. And from there, we move into the content of the program, and at the end is the kind of capstone leadership project. So the project is something that you'll be thinking about over the 10 months and you'll be building towards. And by the point in time you get there, you'll definitely feel ready for it. You know, we often have fellows ask us, how exactly do we know what this leadership project is going to be, or what should we choose, and how should it be focused? And the reality is you'll have 10 months to really work towards it. And by that point in time, you'll feel really confident. You'll have the community behind you to do it well. And we'll be there to help you and to carry it through beyond the 10 months.
So we'll say a little bit now, and I started in the previous slide, but say a little bit more about the content and the curriculum. And Stacy, do you want to keep on going with this, or you let me know when you'd like me to chime in or when you'd like to go?
Sure. Why don't you actually put the points up here? I believe there's 5 of them. So the content and curriculum of the program, as Fletcher mentioned, starts in September, and it runs through May of 2019. And the content is done through webinars, but also through our retreats. And as I had mentioned earlier, we have a variety of experts that come in, but we also share with each other so we can learn from one another on these key pieces that you see here on the slide. So similar to GreenFaith's core values and core mission areas, we have several core areas of the program that we really believe are important to focus on and to dive into. As Fletcher mentioned around environmental racism and environmental injustice and justice, we talk a great deal about that, and we have an entire retreat focused on it. Our first retreat will be focused on that topic. So we look at climate change as it relates to environmental racism, but also a wide variety of issues. And on the retreat in November, you'll go on an environmental health and justice tour. We'll actually take you to different places around Newark, New Jersey to see environmental injustices firsthand, to meet with community leaders, and to really put, sort of a vision to mind of what this actually means in a community. Many of us know what environmental injustice means in theory, but we haven't necessarily seen these communities firsthand. So we will actually do that experientially during the first retreat, and we'll have a lot of different readings and webinars leading up to the retreat to talk about that issue. In addition to that, we'll have some webinars and there you go. We'll have some webinars and also content in both retreats around community organizing. And Estrella Sainberg, as well as several other organizers that we have on staff, will lead the content of those retreats. And what we really will do here is to look into the principles of community organizing and to talk together about how to get this work done in communities effectively. What does that look like, and how does it differ from one community to another? And what are the core kind of practices that you need to focus on to do this well? In addition to the action end of this, we will also do a lot of eco-spiritual practices together, and we will learn about religious environmental teachings. So we'll have webinars that are focused on teachings from various traditions around environment and sustainability. And we'll also do many hands-on eco-spiritual practices at the retreats. We view the retreats as a way to help you not only go through it there and be impacted by it, but to take those same exercises and practices back to your own communities. And many fellows do that very well. So we will do those eco-spiritual practices each of the retreats, with a real focus on that in the second retreat. That's the one where we dive into eco-spirituality more fully. We'll also talk a great deal about science and the science of sustainability and fostering sustainable behavior. And the last piece here, which is definitely one of the most important ones, is around communications. So many of us do this work all the time, but we under-communicate it substantially. And so we'll talk about the best communications practices and ways to really heighten the work that you're doing and get the word out there about it, such that you can continue to inspire people and get people around the work that you're doing. Butcher, anything you'd add?
I think that what we have found is that the value of the program resides in this combination of community building and skill building. There are a body of skills that really are useful if we use them consistently, that can help us have a greater impact. And it goes without saying that the value of long-lasting, trusting relationships within spiritual and religious communities is fundamental and vital. So we really do, just sort of restate at a high level, we see that combination of making sure that our job is to make sure that our fellows get training, get good training in skills that really are useful, and that they have the opportunity to form a strong and good community. And I think that what Stacy said exemplified that in a higher level of resolution. I'll say a little bit about the leadership project piece of the picture, and there are two different slides on this. One related to GreenFaith circles, and one related to the campaigning side of the equation. GreenFaith circles are a fairly new thing for us, and they emerged out of the fact that we saw, 3-4 years ago, that the world of religious and spiritual communities was in a fundamentally different place than it had been 5 to 10 years earlier in relationship to environmental and climate concerns. Well, all of a sudden, there was a level of awareness. There was a willingness and an interest on the behalf of many, many more religious and spiritual communities to become involved in these concerns and in these issues. That's not to say that all religious or spiritual communities were thinking about getting involved in the same way, because there was considerable diversity and variation. But the simple fact was that we saw that the world had changed, and that all of a sudden these issues were very solidly on the radar screen, on the agenda of faith communities, and that what was missing, we think, was a means of helping action on this, that's meaningful action on climate and environmental issues, happen at an ever more widely distributed local level, in a way that those local leaders who are getting really important work done also have the opportunity to continue to build their skills and to connect with peers and colleagues who are doing this work in different kinds of contexts and different kinds of geographic settings. This is very, very similar in a lot of ways to work that religious and spiritual communities have done over time in relationship to hunger, as an example. Many, many religious and spiritual communities globally are active in some way around addressing issues of hunger. and they are able to do good work locally because they have those long-term relationships and they know their local context better than anyone ever can. Fewer of those initiatives have a good way of linking people with their peers or colleagues in different places around their country or around the world. And what we're finding is that we're able to use this same kind of technology that we're using now, along with retreats and in-person opportunities to get together as part of campaigns and mobilizations, as a way to help make that longer distance relationship building happen, and the ability to connect interculturally, interracially, interreligiously on a more meaningful kind of level. So back to GreenFaith Circles, what GreenFaith Circles are is a local manifestation of religiously based environmental work. It comes out of a community and relational organizing approach, which means that one builds values-driven, values-based relationships with people in one's community, in one's city, in one's region. You find who are the people who share your values and your concerns and your passion around these issues. GreenFaith Circles are made up of 5 or more spiritual or faith communities who each appoint 2 representatives at least to represent them on the circle. And circles take an annual collective action together. And then each congregation that's a member of the circle also takes some kind of action themselves within their home synagogue or temple or mosque or church. And they define what those actions are. We know that congregations are in very different places when it comes to this, and that's fine. What matters to us is that the work gets done, and that more and more spiritual and faith communities become involved. And GreenFaith provides a considerable level of organizing, training, and resources and support for the development of these circles. We currently have circles established in New Jersey. There's a circle in the process of formation in New York, in Colorado. Other circles in the process of formation and early stages of formation in South Carolina, Arkansas, Florida, India, and a couple of different locations in Latin America. So we're still at the very early stage of developing this community, but what we're finding consistently is that this concept works. And we've got a lot of confidence in its ability to grow and to develop, and we think that it's a really important thing to give people locally the chance to lead meaningfully, because that's the only way that the problems that we're facing are going to get solved. The other way in which we're lifting up or suggesting that that fellows carry out a leadership project is by some pretty active involvement in a campaign of one kind or another. GreenFaith can provide a lot of opportunities for that, and there are other groups and networks in different countries that are able to do that as well. At GreenFaith, we're very involved in the People's Climate Movement and in the global series of mobilizations, for example, that are going to be happening on September 8th this year. So there will be opportunities for fellows to become involved in mobilizations, in various forms of climate change policy advocacy and campaigning. We have a new initiative, a new campaign, which we're really excited about, called Living the Change, which is a global multi-faith sustainable lifestyle initiative. And it's being coordinated by our colleague, Carolyn Bader, who's based in Mannheim, Germany, and involves active partnerships at present with Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, evangelical, Christian, and Muslim groups. And we're going to be investing a lot of energy into that campaign as it starts to scale up over the course of the next year or two. We've been involved from the start in involving religious and spiritual groups in essentially the overlap between finance and climate change. And so that's about fossil fuel divestment. It's about scaling up investment in distributed renewable energy so that the billion plus people who lack access to modern forms of energy can get that. We're a co-founder of a campaign called Shine, which is about doing that. And then a brand new initiative that we're involved in partnership with Religions for Peace and the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology and the Parliament of the World's Religions and UN Environment is called the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, through which we'll be working with religious and spiritual leaders in 5 countries, Peru, Colombia, Brazil, Indonesia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to educate and mobilize and support religious action to protect rainforests and to protect their indigenous guardians. So there are a lot of ways in which fellows will be able to become involved with one of these campaigns. And also we know that there are a lot of really good, vibrant local campaigns that people can become involved in also. And if that's something that's really evokes passion and real energy from our fellows, that's great also. But we think that getting some really concrete experience working in and running with this kind of work is something that is an important opportunity to focus a leadership project on.
And what I'd add to that, and Fletcher, we do have a question also in the chat panel there. What I'd add to what Fletcher said is that that was a good and long list of the potential opportunities for engagement, the circle, the mobilization, living the change, et cetera. But really what this program is about is not necessarily giving you an exact template of what you'll do in your community, but helping you discern for yourself what's most needed in your community, but also through things like doing the eco-theological statement, really what you're feeling most passionate about and what you feel will help transform your own leadership most. So that's where over the course of the 10 months, you'll really define that pretty clearly and be able to either choose one of the initiatives that were mentioned, or perhaps you'll come up with one on your own that will support you in doing in your own community. And we did get a question from Russell around whether or not fellows will be encouraged to connect with existing networks and interfaith action. And the answer is yes. So really, again, the goal of this program is to help you connect in whatever level you feel most passionate about and is most needed in your community. So in your particular community, there might already be an interfaith hub of some sort that's doing environmental work. And so we would work with you to help define what your engagement with them would look like and what you could really add to that movement that's already there. The goal is not to sort of come in and replace anything that's there, but rather to enhance it and to deepen it.
I think the one thing I'd add to that, Stacy, is that in the past, we've treated the fellowship program as an education and training program, but not as a program so much for ongoing connection. And that's the one piece that we really are intentional about changing. And it was something that emerged very clearly in the feedback sessions that we had during the last 18 months when we were evaluating the future of the program. So it is very much our intention not only to provide education and training, but also to develop an ongoing long-term relationship, to work with our fellows to build effectiveness and to build power, moral power around religious environmental action. And so as Stacy said, we're very open to fellows working with existing networks within their own communities. And we also really are going to want to be looking for applicants who are interested in building bridges and staying connected with the community of fellows that we're going to be facilitating and coordinating, because we've just found that's the way in which we're really able to have the greatest impact possible.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Fletcher. And feel free others to send in additional questions on chat. We will have time for questions here in just a few minutes, but in the meantime. So the benefits of the program, we've spoken, I think, quite a lot over the past half hour about the various benefits, but just to reinforce them here. As you listen in on the webinars and calls that are part of this program, and also during the retreats, you'll hear from a variety of different experts on these issues, and you'll hear from one another and be able to learn from one another to build your skills, to learn about the issues more deeply, and to hear about best practices, quite frankly, what we've seen works well, and to share what best practices look like from one community to another. So that skill building and really gaining a lot of what we call in the last bullet point, intellectual content is key, and that's a big piece of this here. But the 2 points in the middle are equally as important. The sense of community is a strong one. As we mentioned earlier, the fellows still are very much connected with one another. Even the very first class of fellows that graduated a decade ago, they still talk to one another, they still work together, they're still connected to GreenFaith in various ways. And so that sense of community, you really will not find that anywhere else. It's something this program brings to your life and to your community on the local level, and that's a really important piece. And in addition, we talk here about vocational discernment and advancement. Given that this program is 10 months and you do have the monthly webinars and calls with each other, it gives you, in some sense, various pauses, ways to really reflect on where you're at personally with regard to your leadership, and again, what your community needs and how those two things dovetail together. And that sense of discernment is something that we've seen the fellows are really grateful for, and find that this program gives them that place to talk through that and to reflect upon that over the course of the 10 months. Anything else you'd add, Fletcher?
Nope, I think that sums it up well, and I think that I'll move on to the next slide, and we can talk through some of the logistics, and then open the floor for questions and for some discussion.
Sure. And Julie, we see that you've raised your hand. We're going to open up for discussion in just a few minutes here, so you can either send your question over the chat, or we'll be able to ask it directly in just a moment. So we wanted to give you a snapshot of the timeline for this program. It starts in September. So the application deadline, and we'll talk about this in the next slide as well, is July 15th. So you'll apply in July, you'll find out in August whether or not you've been accepted, and then things get started in September with the virtual pieces of this program. We'll have webinars monthly, and so when we say webinars, it won't always be like what you see here, where it's PowerPoints or content that's given directly. Sometimes it will be more discussion-based, and will be ways that you'll learn about these things together through discussion, and not necessarily just through content that's being given over. But we'll have a mix of both discussion and content webinars. The first retreat will be November of 2018. We haven't yet finalized the dates. It likely will be around the 12th of November, but we'll let you know those dates as soon as possible. And that will be in the Newark, New Jersey area, so just outside of New York City. And the second retreat will be in May of 2019, and the location for that is still to be determined. It's very likely it will be in the New York area, but we may have it elsewhere in the United States. And the dates for that are also yet to be determined. So stay tuned for those pieces. Fletcher, you can go to the next slide. So each of you should have received, or if you haven't yet received it, you will receive after this webinar, the various application pieces. So there's an application form, which is fairly straightforward, but it does have some in-depth questions for you to consider and to answer. So we have the application form. There also is a sponsoring institution form. And a sponsoring institution is one that is willing to, in some cases, help fund your work in this program financially, to pay for your tuition fee and travel. But more importantly is the fact that the sponsoring institution will be with you along this journey. So they will help you in various ways on the local level to take action and to put forth your leadership project. So the sponsoring institution is a critical piece, and there is an institutional form that you need to fill out with regard to that. There is also a scholarship form. So we have a limited number of scholarships that we're able to offer to fellows, and there is a form that speaks to that. We do favor giving scholarships to those who have also worked hard to raise money for the tuition in other ways, through the sponsoring institution or other fundraising efforts. And you'll see that described on the scholarship form. So just keep that in mind. And the deadline is July 15th. So you have just about a month to get that in. I did also I will send over after this webinar, an FAQ sheet, as well as another informational sheet on the sponsoring institution. So that will give you some background information to better understand how this program works and what's expected of you in this application process. We will let you know by August whether or not you've been accepted into the program. And then again, you get started in September. So I think we can open it up for questions. Fletcher, how would you like to handle this best? Do you want to open up the phone lines or on chat?
Let's do on chat, and I'm going to exit out of the screen share here because it makes it a little bit easier for us to be able to identify folks. So let me, if folks want to raise their hand, I believe I'll be able in most cases to unmute your phone line so that you can do that. But also feel free to use the chat function if you'd like.
Okay, so Kelly has asked here how long the retreat is, and the retreat is normally 4 days and 3 nights. So typically fellows would arrive on a Monday and depart on a Thursday. That's how we've done it in the past, and we'll likely continue forward with that format. We've been asked if we give a monthly stipend. So GreenFaith does not provide any stipends through this program. We do provide some scholarships to help offset the tuition costs and travel costs. And we have a limited number of those, but we do not provide any kind of stipend. And we're hoping, there's a question here about the dates for the November retreat. We're hoping to get those confirmed in the next few weeks. So Andrew and others, stay tuned for that. I know that everybody's schedules are filling up already, and we're really mindful of that piece. And Fletcher, Julie Foster had raised her hand. I don't know if you can unmute her phone line.
I believe she may have needed to leave. Let me.
Yes, you're right. You're correct on that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Good. So there was a question about if we will offer a similar format in 2019. I think it's our intention to it's our intention to offer the program on an ongoing basis annually. We're not certain because this is the first year back after an 18-month hiatus. We're going to want to evaluate the format. We also are interested in developing the facility to have some of the retreats at least happen in countries outside of the U.S. because we think that that's something that's really important. So so at any rate, but the assumption, we're assuming that we will offer the program on an ongoing basis. We can't be sure about the exact location or if the format will be identical year to year. We have another question about is a local institute necessary for the application because the person who shared in is already a nonprofit working on various projects in Qatar. And the answer is, I think, if I understand correctly, it would be quite easy for the nonprofit that's working on the initiative in Qatar to be the sponsoring institution if it is an established nonprofit. And Nishad, I know you had sent a message earlier on that, and we can connect offline if it would be useful to explore that further. But my assumption is that if it's an established nonprofit, that could be the sponsoring institution. What I will say is I think we really encourage people to think about the application process as a chance to develop relationships with institutions or individuals that you may want to partner with in the future. And to take the application process as a chance to start building those longer term relationships. So let's see. And then there's another question about someone who's a Master's of Divinity student And if the person is accepted, can the educational institution pay the tuition? And the answer is yes. That's absolutely fine. Examples of some leadership projects. Stacy, do you want to talk to that, or shall I talk to that?
Sure, I think we both should, because I know that we each have our own memory of what the fellows have done. So fellows over the years have done a wide range of projects. Some have created religious education curriculum. Some have put together mobilizations in their communities. We have several fellows that have taken on divestment in their congregations. We have fellows that have created farms. The sort of list is endless. We have fellows that have done a wide range of projects, some very direct hands-on sustainability projects, some very spiritually centered or religiously centered projects. And many of them have, over the years, decided to do a green faith campaign of some sort. Some fellows feel more comfortable than others coming up with something on their own. So it really is up to you, and you'll find over the 10 months that you'll be able to hone in on whether or not you want to do something in some sense sort of completely from scratch, or if you'd like to really use a green faith template and move that direction. Fletcher, any other projects you would highlight?
No, I mean, I think you've outlined the range, and what we have found is, I mean, Stacy mentioned some very ambitious projects that fellows took on, and obviously those were not completed in 1 or 2 or 3 months. They were longer term initiatives. What we found, and we've learned about sort of what makes for a successful way to approach a much more ambitious kind of initiative, and that's the sort of feedback that we share with fellows as they're developing their leadership project concept. So I think it's the sort of thing where you shouldn't feel that you need to sort of have a very, very ambitious fellowship leadership project. Often it's better if it starts modest in scope and achievable, and is something that you can do with really high quality, because it's at the end of the day the quality of work that endures.
And I'd mention quickly too that in the past some fellows have worked on projects together. A lot have done their own individual projects, but a few have worked together on a project or have worked with past fellows on a project. So that's not an option as well. If there's a project that's already ongoing with another fellow, or you and another fellow in your class decide that you'd like to work on something together, that's also an opportunity.
Yeah. And Stacy, I just caught in the chat, I misunderstood the question earlier. The person who's a Master's of Divinity student was not asking if the school could pay the tuition, but if the person themselves could pay the tuition out of pocket. And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. One good question, and I really appreciate Julia Roberts raising the question about, do we require or encourage fellows to buy carbon offsets? And the answer is absolutely yes. That's something that we believe in very, very strongly. And we wrestle ourselves as an organization with trying to minimize our own transportation footprint, because it's a considerable contributor to climate change. We do believe that the value of the in-person retreats justifies this, but we also are clear about encouraging fellows to make that commitment to offsetting the carbon offsets of their travel. Weekly hours that we expect fellows to put in, we have found, we don't list a formal requirement. We have found that during the course of a program, fellows put in anywhere from 1 hour a week up to 2 or 3 hours a week. It's something, and sometimes the workload is greater because there's a writing assignment of some kind. And as fellows get into the leadership project, then they really decide themselves about how they're going to do that. We don't have a means of requiring that in a formal sense. So, but I would say if you think of somewhere between 1 and 4 hours per week, that's a safe estimate to consider. And we've seen people do it in a variety of different ways. And then another question.
And I just, if I could just jump in to say, Fletcher, too, it is, we've have had fellows balance the GreenFaith Fellowship Program with many other responsibilities, from being parents to MDiv students to running nonprofits, et cetera. So it's very feasible to do this program while still having a full life, because we know all of us are very busy. So while Fletcher mentioned the hours per week, that's just kind of an estimate. You'll figure out for yourself how to make this program work, and also, again, how to bring it into the fold with everything else you're doing. That's one of the goals with this.
A couple of other good questions about whether someone who'd missed the earlier part of the webinar, asking about whether fellows design their own project with their sponsoring institution, or does GreenFaith help refine the project? GreenFaith definitely offers some suggestions about how the leadership project can take shape, and we're also open to fellows designing the project themselves with representatives of their local community. So that's up to each fellow in terms of how they manage that. Another good question about whether new fellows will be assigned existing fellows as mentors, and we've got a team of GreenFaith fellows who are going to be working with Stacy and myself, and Stacy is the director of the program, to lead that. And Stacy, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that.
Yep. So we are not sure just yet if we'll have a direct mentoring relationship, meaning that you'll have a fellow assigned to you directly, but we will have various ways that you'll be paired up, either with each other in your own class or with a fellow that's graduated, to be able to talk through things together as you move through this, whether it be content or your leadership project or eco-theological statement. We know that mentoring relationship is really important, and we'll have some ways we're building that in.
Good. And then a question about whether the fellowship is certified. We have in the past been able to offer official continuing education credits from Drew Theological School for the program, and so we've done that, and we anticipate that we'll be able to do that. The fellowship itself is not independently certified, but it represents a hybrid of classroom and experiential learning, which we feel, and we've paid quite a lot of attention to the pedagogy that we use, and we feel quite. I think that the best way to say it is that we have seen consistently that fellows are able to use the skills that they develop in the service of the advancement of their own careers and development in that regard. And so we're quite confident in the quality of the program, and also the real results that it's able to help create in participants' lives. And I know we got a question through the Q&A about, is it better to have a sponsoring institution, or is being an individual just as acceptable? And that's something we require, that everybody have a sponsoring institution. We've found that it does not work terribly well if people do this just on their own without any meaningful relationship with a sponsoring institution or a community or network of contacts. And part of what we believe, frankly, is that one of the ways in which this religiously based environmental movement will have a greater impact is if we are more intentional about building relationships with communities, with religious and spiritual institutions, and intentionally bringing them more into this work. So the sponsoring institution is a requirement piece, because we want to make sure that fellows have a relationship with an organization that they're helping move more deeply into this kind of work. So I think that takes us through all of the different questions that we've, let's see. Question about, is the program fully residential or can be done partially from home countries? So for the retreats, we really believe that it's important for fellows to be at the retreats in person, and we're willing and able to help think with fellows about how to make that possible if finances are a block. Stacy mentioned before, we do have some limited scholarship funding, And we also are able to or are willing to try to help work with fellows to help them raise the money that they need to make that journey. But we really encourage fellows to come to those retreats if they can. It doesn't really work to try to participate virtually in those because very often we're doing activities outside or in communities. So being at the retreats is something that's important. And then last question that we've got is any course structure for the fellowship which can be shared. We're in the process of developing that right now and developing the structure of and the sequence of the webinars that we'll be offering. My guess is that we'll have an outline that we can share within the next couple of weeks. We won't have all of the final details before the application deadline. So, Stacy, I'm not seeing, let's see, oh, here we go. Part of an institution that's still forming but won't be official. Is this network sufficient? Yes, that is. I mean, I think that what matters is relationships. And so we know that there are some religious and spiritual institutions that are quite strong and others that are not as strong. We know that there are informal networks that can be very, very strong. What matters to us is that fellows are very genuinely connected to a group, whether it's officially incorporated or not, that is really getting good work done. That's what matters, because we've all seen official institutions that are more or less effective, and we've all seen informal networks that are more or less effective. We want to make sure that fellows are connected with institutions or with networks that can really make an important impact.
Great. Well, thank you all for your really thoughtful questions here and for taking so much time with us on a busy weeknight. We greatly appreciate it. We're very excited about this program, and I'll be following up tomorrow with a recording of this webinar, as well as some additional pieces of information and the application materials again, just in case you didn't receive those previously. Feel free to reach out to either Fletcher or myself. Fletcher, if you want to maybe put up that slide again with our contact information, the last PowerPoint slide. Feel free to call us, email us. We're happy to help and answer any questions that arise for you as you're considering this program. So thank you all. We will be in touch tomorrow.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody, and take good care. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.